Hey guys, so today I've neglected to make this video long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and do it today. One of my friends has been begging me to make him one of these. I've been toting this one around for quite a while, and as you can see, it is a pin made out of 223 cases. So today I'm going to show you exactly how to do this with fairly simple hand tools and a couple hours. So let's get on with it. I'm going to go ahead and tell you all the materials you're going to need, and then we'll go over actually making it. So this is the finished product, and hopefully you get something like this. Nice and polished, nice and shiny, and it generally looks very professional for the amount of work. So to start, of course, you're going to need a pin. And these Bic pins seem to be the easiest to use, so these are the ones I'm going to show you how to use because I like these best. So I've already taken one apart, and all you really need out of it is the ink cartridge, the bit from the end, and the spring. And that's really about it that you need from the pin. The rest you should keep, but is mostly garbage. So moving on to some more materials. You are going to need, of course, 223 cases. I recommend that, as you see, I have quite a pile of them. You're going to want quite a few of them because I guarantee you, if you get, unless you just shot these out of your gun, they're going to be pretty dirty. Some of them are going to be banged up. You see this one's got a huge dent in the neck. You don't want to have that because that will show up in your final result. So you want to have quite a few of these, and usually you can get these for free from any shooting range that shoots rifles. You can use other calibers, but I find 223 to be the easiest to work with and the most comfortable to use while writing because it's not very big in diameter, and I prefer a thinner pin. Also, you're going to need some 22 cases. These, again, you can get for free from just about any shooting range. These aren't reloadable, so people are basically just going to be throwing these away. And these are great for other projects too, such as if you need a supply of brass for melting. These are a really good source because people are throwing them away. They can't be used for really anything else. So yeah, so you need quite a few of these because even though you're only going to need one for the pin in the end, you're probably going to destroy a few while you're making it. So that's about it for materials, other than you will need some solder, and you can skip this step, but I recommend you do it. You're going to need some solder and metal polish of any sort. It doesn't really matter. I used Brasso, and you're going to want at least 1 or 2 paper towels and some paper, and then we'll move on to the actual tools. Now again, towards the end we're going to be doing some soldering, so having a torch is really useful. Technically you don't have to solder it together, but I recommend that you do, otherwise you got a good chance of it coming apart. So soldering, it's not hard to do. You might as well do it. You're also going to need a set of drill bits. I'll go over these sizes as we go along. A power drill to go along with it, and of course a bench vise also helps in the process. That's about it for tools, I believe. So let's move on to the actual construction, and of course safety glasses and other safety equipment for whatever tool you're using. Gloves are also a good idea. Let's move on to the actual construction. Alright guys, so the next step is take a look at your pile of cases, carefully inspect each case. Like this one obviously we don't want to use because there's this big ding in it, so we won't use that one. We'll take a look at the next one, and this one doesn't have any visual blemishes, so we're going to go ahead and polish it. And you could do it by hand, or what I like to do is take a 22 case or anything that fits tight in here. Don't put it in there so tight that you can't pull it back out, but just tight enough to where it grips on, and it'll prevent your drill from crushing the neck of the case. Speaking of that, put the case in your drill very loosely. You don't need it very tight, and it doesn't need to be running true. And then we're going to take some metal polish and put it on a paper towel. You don't really need that much. We're not doing a super good polish, and then we're going to just slowly use our drill to polish up the case. Alright, and that's pretty well polished. And as you can see, maybe there's a little tiny ding in the side. If that bothers you, get a different case. It doesn't bother me, so this is going to be one of the 3 cases I need. So just go through your pile and pick out 3. Have your 3 cases picked out. These ones have a couple little nicks here and there, but that's not too bad for me. We're going to start drilling holes in them. So as you can see, these two don't have primers in them, but this one does. That's not a huge issue. We're going to drill out the primer anyway, but because we already have that flash hole down there, we're going to basically use that to center our drill bit. So we're going to start with a bit that fits inside the neck fairly tight. That one's a bit loose. We'll step on up. I think that 7/32 inch, yeah, 7/32 is the right size for that. So we're going to take it over here to the vise and take our paper. And now we want to be very careful that we don't crush these cases, because believe me, they're very easy to crush. We're just going to take some of our paper, tear off a bit, scrap paper, any paper, newspaper, doesn't really matter. Get a scrap of paper, kind of fold it down a little bit, just enough to protect this when we clamp it up, because we're going to have to clamp it up pretty tight to actually do the drilling, and that's actually probably enough right there. Sorry, I can't tear paper today. So just like that. And then we want to make sure that we're clamping only on the actual head, sort of the top head of the case, because otherwise, like I said, these are super easy to crush and you will crush them easily. So we're going to have to clamp it down pretty hard, and the head of the case can take quite a lot of pressure before it starts to get crushed, but we don't want to push it. But we also want it in there tight enough so that the jaws of the vise don't start eating at it. So we're going to take and obviously put a bit in our drill, and it's not a bad idea to have WD-40 or some sort of cutting fluid to spray in there. WD-40 is not the best stuff, but it works. And just start slow. It's brass, so it'll want to grab. Broke all the way through. Take that out. So as you can see, we have a hole drilled all the way through, before and after, or before and after, and you can drill right through that primer. No need to remove it unless you just want to. As you can see, we didn't crush the head of the case either, so that is looking good. We're going to do the same thing with the next three cases, and as you can see, I've drilled these 3 holes in them. And now what we're going to do is we're going to enlarge these holes a little bit. So we just drilled them out, and now we're going to drill them out to, well, 2 of them, it'll be the final size, and then the third one will enlarge again. So we're going to go ahead and take our drill bits, and I'm sorry, my neighbor is loud. Grab a 7/64 bit, and as you can see, that's the same diameter as the neck of the case, and we're going to go ahead and enlarge all of these to this diameter in the exact same way that we drilled the hole out originally, except this time the case has got to be flipped upside down because this is too large to fit through the neck. So that's why we used the smaller bit before, so we could use the flash hole inside the case as a pilot hole, so we can make sure that these are pretty well centered. So we're going to clamp this up again, just like this with our paper, and we don't want to crush these cases. That would really suck. So get it nice and snug, but don't get it so tight that you're crushing the case. And we'll just take our bit here. We have a nice clean hole, and the neck of a case fits in there nicely. It's a little loose. You could probably have used 1/4 inch if you want them to be nice and tight. In fact, 1/4 inch might be a better option, but as you can see, it's pretty loose, but I'm going to solder mine anyway, so it's not too big of a deal. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other 2 of these, and I'll get right back to you. As you can see, I drilled all these out to a larger diameter, and I did make one mistake. 2 of them should be 1/4 inch, and 1 of them should be 7/64. So make sure that you drill 2 of them out. I mean, if you did drill all of them out to 17/64, not a big deal. As you can see, they're quite loose, but if you drill them out to 1/4 inch, it won't quite go in, but it'll start. That's what you want, because later on we're going to push it together, especially if you're not going to be soldering it. You definitely want that. So now we're going to move on to the next step, and that would be preparing our 22 case. So as you can see in my completed pin, I have a 22 case as the tip, and that's pretty sweet, I suppose. Anyway, so we're going to grab a 22 case, and you don't need to polish it. We're just going to be using the head bit, mostly because these fit inside here good. So we'll go ahead and take our 22 case, and we're going to have to clamp it up in something. I would clamp it up towards the head portion again, because that's going to provide the most resistance to crushing. And you want it nice and tight, but you don't want it so tight that you're going to crush it. If you do crush it, you should have gotten more of these. I have a ton of them, so if I crush this one, it's not that big of a deal. And I would recommend that if you're going to make one of these, you get plenty of them as well, because chances are you're going to ruin at least one or two of these cases while you're doing this. So you can see mine's in there. It's pretty tight, and it's probably going to be tight enough for our use. So we're going to take, again, using the case as sort of, or the case neck sort of as a guide, we're going to take a larger bit, in this case 3/16 inch, and we're not going to drill all the way through it. We're just going to drill a little bit so we have a mark. So that's probably good enough, just like that. And I'll take it out and show you. So you can kind of see, well, you can't see, but inside there is a small divot. Unfortunately, the light doesn't want to cooperate with me. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see it. But there's a small divot in there that we left, and that is the center of the case. And that is what we're going to drill out. Now, it doesn't need to be a very big hole, just big enough to fit the ink cartridge. It really doesn't matter which size you use, although I would recommend using 1/8. So 1/8 bit like this. This is this size. This is a little bit larger than it has to be, but it's not going to hurt anything. As long as it's no bigger than the spring, you're good. So I'll move this so you can kind of see it. All right, that's all it takes. It's pretty thin. So you can see we now have a nice hole, and you can take a file or whatever and deburr that. It's not a big deal. As you can see, mine is not exactly centered, and that's not the end of the world. It just needs to be centered enough to where the ink cartridge can poke out like that. Kind of see how this is going to work. So now we're going to choose what case is going to be the tip. Now, the one that you drilled 7/64, that one is not going to be the tip. Pick one of the other ones that you drilled out to 1/4 inch. This one's pretty tight, so we'll go ahead and use that. We're only going to shove it in there part of the way, and then we're going to put this up in our vise here. A little bit of trouble like me, we want to take a larger drill bit, such as this big 1/2 inch bit, chuck it up into your drill, or drill press, or whatever you got, and kind of use it as a chamfering tool, like so. So now we have a little bit of a bevel there, and that will just make things go a lot smoother, give it a little bit of a place to start. So now we have these. We're going to go ahead and tighten the last one on there. And we're going to go ahead and solder these anyway, so if you made the hole a little bit too large or it doesn't quite fit right, it's alright. We're going to go ahead and push these together. Like I said, do it slowly. Try to make sure they're going together straight. And in some cases, this friction will be enough to hold them together, and you won't have to worry about soldering them. I'm going to go ahead and solder them just because, as you can see, mine are not so straight. True, we'll just take them and roll them against the ground a little bit. Try not to get them too dinged up. We have to adjust them a little bit by hand. Alright, so now we have a couple of options, but I'm going to go ahead and polish them up again and see how they look. So go ahead and chuck it up in the drill again. We already have a 22 case in the end, so that's good. Go ahead and start fitting the back end, but before we do that, here's where you should pick whether you're going to solder this or not. I polished it because I'm going to solder it, and the cleaner the surface you have to solder to, the better. You probably don't, if you do it right, like I did, you probably aren't going to need to worry about soldering it, but I'm going to do it anyway just to make the construction more permanent. I'm not going to try to tell you how to solder or what solder to use. I'm using electronic solder because that's all I have. Really, any solder is good enough. I recommend you use lead-free. So, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. So we're just going to go ahead and heat it up. About 500 times too much solder, but I got it done. That's how it looks now. I made a bit of a mess here. It doesn't look incredibly good, but we're gonna fix that. For now, we're gonna go ahead and work on fitting the actual top, the clicking top of the pin. As you can see, with the 17/64 hole that we made before, this isn't gonna go all the way in. And the issue is that I don't have the proper sized bit. So what I'm going to do instead, at least for this one, is I'm going to drill it out part of the way with a 5/16 inch bit, some of the way, and then we'll go from there. It's kind of a trial and error thing. If you have the right size, use the right size. I do not, and I would imagine that most sort of bit sets like I have aren't going to come with the precise size. There's probably a metric size to begin with because, well, everything's made in China. Not that it's probably not an American thing, I would imagine. I don't know. I think that it's 6mm, but don't quote me on that. I think it's probably going to end up being more than that. I really have no idea. So our metal polish again, and this will be the sort of final polishing. I also have some steel wool. Now, because I have this solder that's kind of splattered, I'm going to take some steel wool and try to get rid of that because I'm not good at soldering. Leave your criticisms down below. Alright, so that's good. I got rid of all that solder for the most part. So now we're going to go ahead and commence with the final polishing. And would you look at that, friends? Now that looks really nice. And now for the finishing touch, we're going to go ahead and take our ink cartridge, and of course you see the tip in here. Make sure it's not blocked. Drop our ink cartridge in there, and make sure that it pops out just like that. And then push our mechanism in just like that. And as you can see, we now have a beautiful pin that you will probably keep for quite a while. It's a very nice writing utensil, of course, and if you think that it doesn't write for some reason, click it, and show you that it does write. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a very nice day.